we'll go ahead and we'll call this meeting to order, the Sacramento Regional Solid Waste Authority at 3 p.m. on October 12, 2017. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Yes, good afternoon, Directors Ashby, Carr, Frost,
Here.
Guerra,
Here.
Kennedy, Peters, Cerna,
Here.
Natoli,
Here.
and you have a quorum.
And we're working on different time. It's 3 p.m. You heard the chair.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. 3:14. 3:14 p.m.
Oh, yes.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so if everyone could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if the clerk could please read the television announcement.
Yes, this meeting of the Solid Waste Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed caption and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay Saturday, October 14th at 4 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker identification form located at the back of chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. If you have any electronic devices, please silence them at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and go with, we'll call the first item.
Okay. Item number 1 is General Manager's Report.
And I would just like to say thank you for everybody being here today.
Perfect. I love that expediency. Okay, number 2, will approval of the consent. Is there any questions on the consent calendar?
Nope, so moved.
It's been moved by Board Member Natoli, second by Supervisor Cerna. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Measure passes. And if the clerk could please call the third item.
Item number 3, resolution exempting food waste recycling haulers from franchise requirement.
Okay, so this is, my understanding, a continuation of our last meeting, and I think we got to direction from the board to address some of the issues that we had from the ag folks and rendering folks, along with making sure that we were not throwing the baby out with the bathwater on the franchise system that we have, but staff could give us any additional information on our resolution here.
Well, the information you provided was correct, and we determined with County Council's help that we didn't need to do an ordinance change, that this could be done with a resolution.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions from the public? Nope. If not, any board members?
Move the item.
It's been moved by Board Member Cerna. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Board Member Frost. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Measure passes. We'll move on to item number 4.
Resolution establishing a rural exclusion zone for calculating quarterly franchisee diversion performance.
Okay, this is again another continuation of our last hearing, where we provided direction to basically create an exclusion zone, so we didn't have any particular preferential treatment, but ensuring that the rural area that has lower amount is we can address the amount of flow there. Wanted to make sure to see if staff had any additional information on this issue, or any board members have questions.
No, I just wanted to say thank you to the board for the consideration for this item. I think this is the fairest resolution for the issue that we have.
Good, good. Any questions from the public, or from the board, or comments from the public? No comments from the public and no questions from the board. Is there a motion on this item?
Mr. Chair, I would move it. I just note the staff report that, and I know it's intended here in the third paragraph on page 2 of 3, that talks about analysis of the facts at hand led to the consensus that a rural exclusion could be acceptable to all franchises that would accommodate cow waste and the rural handicap. I just think it's a rural opportunity.
Rural opportunity versus rural handicap. Yeah, I prefer that word too, yeah. Exactly.
I know what was intended, so anyway, again, accommodating that, but
Yeah.
and you don't have to change the staff report. I wanted to make comment, but I thank the staff and certainly all the folks in the audience and others who worked on this. I think it's a good resolution. Obviously, the state may weigh in on this at a future date, and we'll see what that brings us. But this is a good start. So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Board Member Natoli. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Board Member Frost. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? If not, we'll go ahead and all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, measure passes. We'll move on to our third discussion item, the street recycling. Oh, wait, no, I'm on the wrong one here.
You're right. Street recycling
Yeah,
container
it is,
collection service.
That's exactly the, wait, item 5 here. Sorry about that. Yeah, we'll move on to item 5. Sorry.
We're good. Yeah, street recycling container collection service.
Okay, wait, I think,
What? No. No, a strategy to achieve cleanup of
Initiatives
illegal
aimed at
dumping and
reducing and
blight.
preventing illegal.
yeah, there's we've got,
Illegal dumping and blight.
yeah, the online agenda and the most updated agenda is a little different, I think.
Okay. Let me read the other one. Update on strategies to achieve cleanup of illegal dumping and blight in commercial corridors. Is that one?
And that is the item was on the agenda that was posted? No? No, I hear no, so we got
Oh, we've got a problem here, I
a
think.
problem.
Where?
That, because I know the one that we downloaded here, but this is different.
And then,
Staff, could we quickly take a look at,
Do you want to see what we have, Amanda?
yeah,
yeah, that's what I read.
yeah.
What you just read just now, but somebody else had an agenda that said something about street.
Recycling? Oh. Okay.
See, and then
Let's
that's,
see, if I go to the online version here, October 12th, and the hard copy that we have is the correct one, but
But online, that's
online it has a legal dumping report, but the agenda attachment is different. Could we ask counsel here? I mean, because it is listed, if you look at on the online, it does have item 5 illegal dumping report. It's when you download the PDF of the agenda that I think it's the old agenda.
What is listed online?
this is the online one.
This is the online. Can we double check if the staff report was listed? Online.
The staff report is listed online.
Yes, this
It
was
is, so when you go to the online report here,
So both staff, there's two different staff reports that are listed online? Or one that doesn't match the agenda item?
one that doesn't match, so when you look here at the meetings,
Yes.
it has illegal dumping there, but when you download that one, it doesn't have it.
Because the staff report was posted online was correct, and because it's an information and file only item, I think we can go ahead and move forward with the discussion. Since we're not taking any action on,
Okay.
what was
And the staff
incorrectly
report is
posted.
listed online. I can see the
Right.
staff report here.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so there's sufficient information there to move forward. We can
Okay.
go ahead, yeah.
Doug, we'll go with the presentation here, but I think just in the future, if we could make sure that that agenda download for the future is correct, that would be helpful.
My apologies.
not a
I'm at a
problem.
loss for words as to how that happened. Essentially, what we were trying to do with this, though, is just at the last board meeting, there was a discussion in terms of some of the funding that the SWA has in terms of the franchise fee that may be available for other programs. We wanted to give you a quick snapshot of some of the things that we were looking at. We did reach out to, I believe it was 16 of the PBID organizations. We're trying to get their input in terms of what in their specific areas, see if there's a consensus across the board. We just, again, though, wanted to give you kind of an update of where we were going. This is not a final list. We're still developing the list, and we're still working with the PBIDs on what works best for in their particular areas. At the appropriate time, we'll come back to the board with a list of the items and some cost information and some where we think the benefits would be for the different programs, so we can give you a better idea of where that money might be spent.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments from the public?
No, I do not have any speaker slips.
I think we do have one person over here who's, Mr. Lean.
this even though it's a little late. I actually learned last time that this raises itself up. I thought that the new one didn't, so it's great.
It was set for the chair's size.
There you go. Good afternoon, board. At the last meeting, I failed to stand up and make a suggestion, and that's that I think one of the things that both the board and staff ought to consider is a reduction in the rate back to the 8% that it was. The extra funds are being raised because of the amount of waste that's coming in, and with the economy doing better, et cetera, we're getting a lot more waste, and I don't know the numbers exactly, but I would suggest that there probably would be extra funds available even at the 8% if it broke back to that. Secondarily, I would suggest that as close to the ground, if you will, that you can get these funds, if you're going to spend them for cleanup, the better off you're going to be. I think that the PBIDS is a great example and a great place to put it, because they already have these programs going. It would be able to augment them and have extra funds to do it, because I think that, I know in the Power Line Alliance we have that issue, and I'll speak to that in just a second, but when I change hats. But I did want to relate one story that I heard from Police Chief Hahn on, yesterday at lunch, and that was when they have officers out dealing with the homeless, that their officers are actually the ones who are hauling the trash after they end up with dealing with the homeless. They come back and they're cleaning up the trash, and to get to where we have police officers picking up trash doesn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of what we're all dealing with. Finally, I'm going to switch hats from L&D Landfill to my role as a director of the Power and Alliance and a member of the executive committee. And I can tell you, we've commented on this, but I can tell you that we're constantly picking up trash in the Alliance. We have a 3-man crew that works every day, and we can't keep up with it, and let alone dealing with the homeless situation. And the extra funds would be very much appreciated and used very quickly. I can assure you that as one who has input into the budget. With that, unless there's any questions.
I think we have questions here from Board Member Cerna here.
Yeah, so I have a question. I'm trying to reconcile the first part of what you said with the last part of what you said, and I issue my comments respectfully here. But if we were to go back to 8% versus 10%, with the economy being as robust and active as it is, you're gonna lose funding. There's just, it's simple arithmetic. So given what the last part of what you said, given the need to, which I totally agree with, which is to have a broader resource base to deal with illegal dumping, deal with the fact that we have a growing set of social impacts associated with people that are suffering homelessness, doesn't it make more sense to maximize the availability of resources to do the kinds of things that I think you rightfully point out, which is not having expensive law enforcement picking up trash, but having a greater army of folks that are dedicated to doing just that perform that duty?
I agree that there's a conflict in what I said. There's there's the balance between the business owner who is paying an additional fee, where we have several buildings where we'd love to see our trash rates go down. There's also the side to where going way back in the history of the creation of this fee, I think it's fair to say that when it was created, the way that the fee has been used since it was created, in terms of the excess funds and them going to the city and county, was not the way it was originally set up to be. It's the way it's evolved, and that historically probably can't be undone. in terms of freeing those funds up. So there's a real conflict there. And but if you're not going to lower the fees, then put them to work as I suggested.
That's the part I definitely agree with you on.
Yeah.
I mean, representing the district that I do, and especially in the unincorporated parts that are not too distant from the power and corridor, those parts of South Oak Park and the Fruit Ridge Pocket, where I was just at yesterday and reported no less than about 25 instances of illegal dumping using our 311 app, the county's 311 app. I can tell you that I'm certainly not satisfied with where we're at, nowhere near it in terms of our ability to adequately address what amounts to a very frustrating circumstance with, especially in and around the first of the month, for what are somewhat obvious reasons where evictions tend to be a little more prominent, where we have some enormous piles of home furnishings and household garbage, in some cases even dead animals. I mean, and it's a really out of control in certain parts of our county. So I don't mind saying it again and being redundant, but I totally agree with the speaker that if we're going to stand by the increase that we all voted for back 5 years ago, it was my motion. Let's make sure that we're putting those funds to use in a way that we understood they were going to be put to, and that is to help those members of this SWA board, the jurisdictions we represent, deal with illegal dumping, and we need to do a better job of flanking our P-bids, quite frankly, along our commercial corridors, but it is in some cases just completely out of control, unacceptable, and I'm not here to just pick on us and our administrator at SWA. I'm saying the same thing to our county executive, and I have frequent conversations with my colleagues serving on the Sacramento City Council, where it overlaps with the district I represent. And it's not to institutionalize picking up the outcomes of illegal dumping on such a regular basis that people become accustomed to it as a given service. So we got to walk that fine line so that we don't give that impression, but we ought to be doing a much better job. So I do agree with you there.
Well, and to be perfectly clear, I'm back with my L&D landfill hat on. There's, if in fact you're not going to lower the fee, then I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Lean. Board Member Natoli.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Phil, and certainly Mike. And I have to leave to take a conference call here very shortly, but I want to note that I think that working with our local organization, whether it's P-bids and or other associations, to really on the ground, in addition to obviously what our solid waste departments do and others that participate in certainly keeping our neighborhoods aesthetically pleasing and clearing a lot of the litter and debris and dumped items. I would just note that one of the things I think that we're seeing more and more of, and it won't be a surprise to most folks in this room, but the abandonment of boats, but not in the rivers as much as, well, there's a lot in the rivers too, but also on the streets. And if they're not on a trailer, then they become difficult to dispose of. Recreational vehicles that either have been people have taken parts off of, or they no longer run, and they're just dumped on rural roads and neighborhoods and business districts and areas that obviously some of these businesses operate in. They see them just abandoned, and they become very difficult to dispose of. And I guess I would like, as a part of this, to look at, again, I know there are certain programs, and certain responsibilities on street and off street, but they're difficult for code enforcement and for law enforcement, whether it be CHP, city police, others, to find someone to take those and actually do the disposal, because there's costs associated with that because of other requirements for disposal of toxics and so forth that are part of the construct of some of those vehicles and vessels. So I guess I would ask us that we could take a look at that too, that I think jointly, that certainly the city and county could look at a way. I mentioned to actually Mr. Cerna that, with the county having Kiefer as, a location, but certainly you need proper disposal, that maybe there's a way, working with folks in this room who know how to usually pick up items and to properly remove certain pieces and maybe dispose of them, to try to find a way to help us overcome this. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be a challenge for code enforcement, for law enforcement, for our neighborhoods, our business districts. And I'd like to see that as being a part of discussion, because maybe we do something locally with some funding, and we help ourselves through, obviously funds that are derived certainly from activities that the franchise fee is charged to. And so I'd like to see, but I'm all in agreement with the PBIDs and with the community association. I think it's a great way. So.
Thank you, Board Member Natoli. I think that's a good segment into a conversation I had with our staff. One, I do want to thank our staff for taking the time to look at what are the effective ways. You heard right now that working with the PBIDs, I think, is pretty strong support from this board. But more importantly, how do we have a comprehensive city and county and SWA look at the how we manage this waste, and also look at preventative measures. But I think to the point that I do want to credit Board Member Cerna here, because he did bring up the issue of we should be using those fees appropriately. And I think this is the right step. I think we're moving in the right direction. On the immediate, I would like to make sure that we start using some of those fees today and get to work today to clean up some of those areas, but start that planning process for both prevention and mitigation. With that, Board Member, our Vice Chair.
I just wanted to ask, where are those fees going currently over the past 5 years?
So we collect a 10% franchise fee, roughly $5 million a year now. Our expenses, the way we do our budget, the revenue minus the expenses to run the SWA with the different programs we have has left us with a balance at the reserve balance at the end of a year. And so basically that money gets divided between the city and the county in given back to the general funds of the two entities. So the city and the county collect, I want to say $1 million.
They're not specifically going toward special programs to...
No. Now, I do know both entities at different times have earmarked those funds for special programs. My understanding is right now the county money goes into the county general fund. I don't know, I can't speak for where the city money comes from or where it goes, but it just, in the county's perspective, it goes into the general fund.
If I could, perhaps it's time to look at maybe a necessary instrument in both instances with both the city and the county that maybe takes the directive that was issued 5 years ago and takes it a step forward, a step to advance the formal acknowledgement of what the use of the funds need to be used for. Because if I'm hearing from you correctly that it just goes into the general fund and it's left to, each springtime for the city manager and the county executive at their discretion to treat it as discretionary and then appropriate it in their respective recommended budgets, I'm not so sure that the amounts are finding their way to the intended purposes at the order of magnitude that was expected when we adjusted the fee. So maybe there needs to be, I don't know if it's a resolution, I don't know if it what it is, but perhaps that discussion needs to be had with your counterparts at both the city and the county.
I'd be happy to do that. And just if we take this further if we build up the programs, the expenses will rise and there'll be less money to distribute at the end.
Yeah. And I do want to, again, thank Doug, because the conversation that we should have is what's our regional approach to waste? I mean, waste doesn't just stop at the city or county line. We have to figure out how are we maximizing our usage and making sure that the usage goes to the intended, the fees go for the intended purpose, which was to collect waste on the commercial corridor areas where we see this happening, whether it's apartments or whether it's retail fronts or industrial areas. But
I think part of it was allocated to the Parkway plan this year.
Yeah.
Which is illegal dumping in the Parkway.
Yeah, right. But to Supervisor Natoli's comments on RVs and boats, it's a real problem, I know, in my district and throughout the county. And to the point where we have good citizens that are actually trying to figure out, okay, if they don't move it, how can we figure out how to move it? Which puts them in a position of actually breaking the law to get rid of garbage on the street, on their street. So, you know, if we can't get rid of RVs because the tow companies won't do it because they actually have to pay to get rid of it, and so it's costing them money, then it's realistically going to cost us more. We need to come to terms with whatever that is and figure out how we can deal with the problem, I guess. So I like his idea about expanding that conversation in regard to vehicles.
And I will tell you, boats and RVs, if put on my other hat that I do during the day, boats and RVs are a big problem, and we are having discussions at the county level on terms of who's going to handle those and where the contracts and the funding's coming from. The only thing that I'll need to work through on this is making sure that the SWA money that's generated out of the commercial area goes forth towards the commercial
Correct.
Purposes.
Right.
And so if it's a rural county road, that may not be in a commercial corridor, may not be able to apply there. But I'll work with county council
Or
on
residential, single-family community.
Right.
Yeah. Correct.
right, same thing.
Good. Other comments? If not, thank you, staff, for starting this conversation. And I think you heard, a little bit of a directive here. Let's figure out how, when we put this resource to use now, and then figure out our long-range plan. Okay. Great. With that, our last item is comments from the public. Are there no comments from the public listed? Okay, then we're adjourned at, I think I got the time now right this time, 3:40? Is that good?
You got it.
Okay, good.